welcome to In the Weeds.
Hello. Well, I'm excited to be here with you, Cass.
Yes, thank you for entering this journey with me as I play with new formats, this being one of them. Obviously, you've seen a little bit about it, but this is a format where I really want to work with myself and others on how do we practically kind of go through life and figure out meaning questions. And I don't know exactly what this format will end up being, but what I've started doing is reading some experts from this book that
Hmm.
my husband's godfather gave me, and kind of use that as a starting point to kind of talk about stuff. So I'm going to read the first little passage of this to kind of get us going because I think it really
Sure.
frames the heart behind what this is. And then
Mm,
I'll turn over to you to kind of give an intro and sort of talk about where you feel practically you get meaning and where you're working
hmm
on meaning in your life. And then we'll read a couple passages from the book and use
hmm
that as a jumping point for a deeper conversation. That sound good?
hmm hmm Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. I'm up for it.
All right. So I'll start with the intro because I think it sets off really well the heart of this.
Okay.
So, every heart should be a little garden. We should keep it always clear of weeds and full of sweet and beautiful plants and flowers. A garden spot is not only a thing of beauty, but is also a blessing to all who see it. So, Andrea, why don't you give us a little introduction of yourself and tell us what's your little garden spot in life? What gives you meaning and beauty in your life?
Oh, this is such a lovely little jumping off point. I love gardens. And like the symbolism behind gardens. So okay, I'm trying to like my mind is going so many different directions, but I'm gonna try to
Take your
put
time.
some constraints.
Yeah.
Okay. So my name is Andrea with the bangs. That's my internet name. And I I've been like online or have had my YouTube channel for I think 5 years now. And that's a space that I've been sort of really looking for meaning and exploring different types of meaning, understanding what it is. I think that my YouTube channel has been my journaling. That's what I've come to the conclusion of because Paul Vanderklay, our patriarch, Bridges of Meaning, the Bridges of Meaning
Our
Discord
internet
server.
patriarch.
Yes, I remember him saying, it's not about the subscribers for these YouTube channels. It's not about getting big. And he's like, I'm already too big, bigger than I want to be, and all these things of for his YouTube channel. And I'm always like, okay, cool, thanks. Like inside, well, maybe probably outside too. We'll worry like, well, why would I make these if I don't want anyone to watch them at all? And I took it a little too extreme. Truthfully, and this is what always happens with like, oh, that new Bible verse that I read is completely different in the meaning that I never understood before. Any sort of advice that's given, things kind of, oh, I get it in a different way. And so this is what I'm getting at. It's it's not necessarily that you don't want anyone to see the videos. It's you in a semi-privately, publicly way of working through something. That's by you, I mean me, but you as well.
Yeah,
Like these little YouTube channels, and we call it this corner of the internet.
some people do. It's
Yes, some do.
pretentious.
Yes. Oh, well, what else is it called?
Oh, I don't know,
Oh, okay.
but some people don't like the TLC branding.
Oh,
But we won't get into that.
okay.
That's not what this is about. Continue.
Well, in the space that I am existing in on the internet, that's what I believe is it's done for me. I've never been a journaler. I've always had intentions of starting a journal, and usually I like adding pictures and stickers and all this since I was, a young girl. And there's always like, see me like 5 pages, maybe if I'm lucky, and then just drops off to like blank pages. And so I think that this is the most consistent sort of journaling thought expression of my life that I've had. It was since 2019 that I've been putting up videos. And so I think that's how I've been processing what it means to be an adult woman whose children are growing up.
Mm.
Because when I had really little children, I wasn't doing this. But when I think my youngest was around 3, which is still young, but I had like 3, 4, and 6. that was when I think I started, wait, I need to do the math. Oh no, I'm so bad at math. Okay, he's 8 now. 8 minus 5 is 3. Yes. So he was around 3. And so I was in a space where I had a little bit more time, and my mother-in-law moved in down the way. And so, like, literally 5 houses down. And so took a more active role in watching them. And I just had a little bit more time on my hands that I could search for this meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Because also Jordan Peterson, I had watched all of his earlier internet stuff, not the political. I wasn't really caring about that side. I was more interested in his biblical lectures.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the summer before that I was, really interested in that. And so it just brought up interesting questions that I was like wanting to explore. And I got on Twitter and was on Twitter a full 6 months before I started my YouTube channel. And that sort of helped me to get familiar with some people who I then had on. And I've gone through quite a few iterations of my YouTube channel. I mean, branding wise, it's a nightmare. It's like start a new one, start a new YouTube channel. Like I probably should have. I've gone from interviewing like more scientist type people to philosophers to storytellers to this pastors to this and that and the other mixed in, and then I actually also want to look into the feminine as well. Also, I think I also want to look into narrative, both ancient and modern, so film sometimes. And now I'm like, I think I just want to mostly do narrative and film. And sometimes I still interview people, but it has to usually do with story of some kind. And I probably should have just started a new YouTube channel. I probably, if I was a wise marketing branding person, I probably should have, but I didn't, because it just sounded like too much work as well. But I also was like, this is my journey. This is all part of where I've come.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been asked like recently, like, oh, you're not as active on your YouTube channel. And part of it is because I just am more, I've started working 2 days a week. So I'm busier, just I don't have as much time. So it's that, plus I also feel like I'm not as lost as I maybe was before, which is
Mm.
fine. It's okay to, not all those who wander are lost. But I was lost though. So I guess that quote doesn't apply. I just like to quote Tolkien whenever I can. But anyway, so all that to say, I have gone through, this is my journal of
It's like a
going through
live
all
journal
these things.
entries.
Yes, yes. And so to go back to the garden, in the midst of all this, I actually forgot to say I started dressing in vintage clothing, and that was part of my exploration of the feminine. And so my sort of corner that's more like the garden that I'm cultivating, I literally have small plants that I've been cultivating as well since COVID. That I just, I'm like, I've kept them alive for years. Yay. So I have a little corner that's in my like upstairs in my living room, and it is right by the big window, and I have a reading chair right beside it. So I I think of it as a sort of small Eden. And when I dress in my vintage clothing to bring that in, I feel like I look on the outside how I feel on the inside. And it sort of makes me feel like me more, I
Hmm.
think. And sometimes it's like, I feel like the Lord has asked me to let go of those sorts of things. I went to the UK last year, and it rained most of the time, and my hair is bone straight in really humid climates, which is, I'm sure, the opposite for you.
Yes.
but, but for me, I'm just like, oh, I had to give up my curls, Lord? What? But that's me, and it's way more me than I realized. Like I was leaning on it way more than I realized. So there are some times where it's like, okay, you got to hold this stuff with an open hand, Andrea. So these are just things I've been learning. And so the YouTube channel and being able to verbally process these things, and then also like the participation aspect of femininity that has come to my understanding and knowledge through being on the Discord, meeting up with like ladies teaching me how to knit, and then also just wearing like these vintage pieces that have like a more traditional looking vibe and stuff. These are all things that I feel like are, different garden plants or flowers that I've, cultivated, and it's like my own little like Eden that I'm trying to get back to in a way. And along with the nurturing my children.
Sure.
That's a big part of my life too. But that's why I haven't been as available for my channel, because I'm like, oh, I need to focus on them a bit more, as well as I'm working part-time too.
Yeah, so
I
it
feel like I
sounds
took a long time to explain that.
no, no, that's totally fine. You totally have the space to. It sounds to me like you have this multifaceted sense of like what garden this garden is that you're tending, and a lot of it was really focused on trying to figure out the big meaning and identity questions of what it is it to be a human, what is it to be a
Mm-hmm.
woman, what is it to be a
Mm-hmm.
mother, and like a community member. Does that sound
Mm-hmm.
does that sound right to you?
It does, and it does. I am someone who really needs to know what is it, why is it, like how I need those questions answered, and if my I can put my finger on it, oh, that's what is happening here. Okay. Then I can move forward.
Hmm.
And it's sometimes the unanswered questions that are hard for me to let go of, but they all have their place too. Mysteries and whatnot. Like there's those sorts of things. I guess part of the journey is me being allowing. So me allowing those sorts of things that like sometimes it's okay to continue these things with the question still unanswered.
Right.
I'd say my most clear thing that I've was used to be focused on was, oh, who am I as a woman apart from being a mother? Because it's
Right.
very clear to me what being a woman who is a mother is,
Yeah.
especially in our culture. But
Well, and you were a
um,
mom very young. So I think
right, I
for
was
you,
26. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, when I had my first, and he's now 12. And it's something that I think it's good to know what, again, not everyone is like, I need to know these things, but I do. I needed it. And it helped me to be a better mother, because I knew that I was an entity of myself apart from motherhood. Um, and to sort of be like okay with that. Like, so lately the latest questions are moving forward in my life. I'm nearing 40. I'm a couple years away from 40.
hmm
And I know it's just a number, but it is also this sort of like what I use the narrative, because that's why that's the theme that is stuck through my all my YouTube channeling is it that's where I think the meaning comes from for me and for a lot of people and a lot of humanity. And so, right now there's this, thing about Snow White and Disney and all that. So that's its own sort of like, oh my gosh, this thing's coming out actually. So that's happening right now in the culture. But also Jonathan Pajot came out with his own Snow White book, and I think the Daily Wire is coming out with their own Snow White. So
everybody
Snow
wants in
White's
on the Snow White game.
everyone wants in, and I actually like my son, my middle son, my 10-year-old, he and his school friends started calling me Snow White because of this. I didn't actually, I think of Rosie the Riveter for this
Yeah,
guy more,
yeah. You have a
but
more rebellious spirit than your
well,
children.
perhaps. Yeah, I'm like, I don't care about trends. I'm gonna wear whatever vintage fashions I like. But it's something that I'm like, oh, that's kind of cute and funny and whatever, that they're like, that's, I guess I do resemble. And I actually have, like, at the airport 2 years, yet I know last year a little girl was like, mommy, is that Snow? And I was, and I'm like, hi. And she's just like, hi. So like, oh, that's kind of cute. That's sweet. I guess it's not just my son, but it's the truth is, Cass, I'm in my life, I'm nearing the evil queen age. Like, doesn't mean I'm evil. It does not meaning that I'm an evil like entity. But I really want to have Jonathan back on my channel, because I'm like, I want to talk about. Can we talk about the women nearing the non-maiden, going away from the maiden stage? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I've not been in the maiden stage for like a long time. It's been 15, nearly 15 years. But it's no, I mean, I've been in the mother stage. I'm still in the mother stage, but I'm nearing I'm just getting, I'm nearing older children.
Yeah, you're in the cusp between these like middle transition where it's like not
Like, I'm
quite.
not the crone yet, Lord willing. Like, or grandma. Like, I'm not there. I'm very far away from that, but I'm still like, I'm nearing, like I said, like I'm closer to the evil queen and in age. And I am like, I need to explore this because
Your evil
I need
queen
to.
phase, or
I know my evil queen face. I know, what does that look like? But this is why I'm confused. I'm like, what does this look like? I need to.
yeah.
So that's the. I haven't thought about it a lot, but it's been something that since all the Snow White talk has been in my mind, and that's something that I need, something to kind of compel me to go back to my online journaling, my
Mm,
YouTubing. So I'll probably start back soon. It's again, I've sort of gotten out of the habit of it. So I need to,
mm,
I do miss doing it, to be honest, but yeah, so there's the compelling questions that bring me back.
mm.
Cause I kind of, if I'm like, oh, I'm good. I'm just gonna do my in real
Well,
life
in
thing.
some ways, if you're good, you've done what you need with the project, right? You
Right.
don't need it the
Yeah.
way that you did, but it sounds like this new transition is ramping you up to a whole nother set of questions of what does that mean,
It
and
could be
it
bringing
could
me
be
back.
yeah, it
Exactly.
could be
Yeah.
beneficial.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that little intro. I think that's very
A
helpful in
little.
setting.
You're
Yeah.
like, I think that this is the
Hey,
whole podcast now.
no. It's little for this corner. I think this little
Hmm.
space that we
I
find
guess you're
ourselves
right.
in.
Yeah.
So that's a really great launching point. What I'm going to do is just read a couple little entries from this. Now, this is
Sure.
a book. It's a spiritual diary of Alexandra Fyodorova Romanov, the Empress
Right.
of Russia.
Okay.
And there are just a lot of beautiful little sayings in here. So the next little piece has a couple smaller sayings. So I'll just read a couple of them, let that be sort of a jumping off point, and then we can kind of let the conversation go.
Hmm.
Um, but I'll start and I'll put a little pause between the different breaks
Sure.
because they're very short. Okay, so the first one: only she who has sacrificial love deserves life. Second one should never uh, one should never content oneself with what has been achieved as if there are no other peaks. And I'll just do the
Mm.
last one here. The Messiah is called the servant of God many times in the Old Testament. Service is not something base but divine. If only we brought this law of service into our everyday lives, it would make us attentive to everyone and would turn our homes into places of divine love. If we learn to serve like Christ, we would not be thinking of how to receive some sort of assistance, attention, and support from others, but of how to bring to other kindness and goodness.
Mm.
So I can repeat any of them if you want, but how do those strike you? Is there one that stands out more to you? I mean, I feel like all of them link very well with what you just set up in this sort of
Mm.
movement and this transition, but how do they strike you?
Well, the being a servant, that seems to be the theme, like sacrificial love. Um,
Yeah, the first and the second definitely seem more linked in that way of like
mhm.
service. The third one's really interesting though too. One should never content oneself with what has been achieved as if there are
Mm.
no other peaks. I find that one very interesting with your sort of
Mhm.
um, questioning of like, okay, well, I'm ending, I'm moving out of the maiden mother layer of life, and
Mhm.
every second slowly moves me towards this other M that I might not be ready for or know how to handle. I find that
Mhm.
interesting with what you shared, but I don't know how it strikes you.
So yeah, I actually did like that a lot, in the sense of that truth of, when you're a child, you have the image of, oh, okay, I'm gonna get there. For me, it was a couple different ages, but like 16. Daddy, I'm 16 years old. I'm not a child. Like, that's Little Mermaid.
Yeah, yeah.
16. Okay, 16's old. Okay. Like,
Well,
to
it used
me,
to be.
it used to be, yeah, yeah. But like, it's It's so that for me as a 4-year-old, three and a half or 4-year-old and older, okay, so I guess there, but then it's like, okay, I'm 16 now. It's like I'm still a teen. Okay, well, 21. Okay, then I'm an adult, even though I was technically an adult at 18 because Canada. But it just, I guess American culture, pop culture has really influenced me. So it's like, okay, 21 is the age. And then then there's just no other, there's never a time of arrival. You're always like, well, like the older I get, the more I'm like, there's no time of, okay, so now I'm blank and I'm old enough to no longer get flustered or angry at my family and or whatever, like there's no time. And the older I get, and the more understanding I have for that, and you can be more mature. I was going through a bunch of old cards I had literally from like my 16th birthday. I have trouble throwing cards away, and so I had all these princess cards, and I used to
16.
love Disney princess, like I loved them. And I was like minorly like, ooh, that's very young. Like, and I'm like, and I was old. But it's sort of kind of like probably being a bit too harsh on me, to be honest. But it's sort of, oh, I've so outgrown this. Oh, that's why. That's what I'm seeing. I don't want to receive an Ariel birthday card now, which is good. Like that's good. I don't have daughters, but if I did, I'd love to give them one.
Hmm.
But there you do get over things. There are juvenile things or young things you kind of get over. It's true. But get being finished, and that's the thing about like expecting like the peak, and then you're like, I did the thing. It's never over. And you never should want it to be over because we're always being like refined. And I mean it all depends on what you follow as like a belief system. Like for us as Christians, it's like, okay, we're always being that refined like by Christ, and like further up and further in, as C.S. Lewis, our favorite non-saint, we like to quote. I'll probably quote him again before the, this podcast is over. Um, but yeah, I do see that it's never over, and it's that being okay, and we're always striving, and we should always be striving. And the older I get, the more I'm okay with not being done yet. Like that's okay. More
Hmm.
settled, and like that's okay if I'm not 100% sure about this or that. Um, it's like knowing what you don't know
Mm.
and being okay with it, and continuing to strive, of course. But I always, one thing I want to keep is my curiosity. Like that'll never be something I look at as juvenile. Like I'm always like, oh, what does this mean? What does that mean? I'm curious as to what this or that. If I pull on this thread, like what journey will I go on? I'm okay with that. So yeah, I think I flushed that one
It's solved. It's settled.
out. Yeah, right. For now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I think it's very interesting because you're in a different stage of life than I am, where
Mhm.
um, you know, at what some might say a later age, which is what I would probably
Depends on
say
who you talk
myself.
to.
Depends on who you
Yeah.
talk to. It's more average now, probably, but and entering that stage of motherhood, of
Hmm.
like still having the young kid at home,
Hmm.
still in the weeds of all of the the messiness that comes with a baby.
Hmm.
She's almost not a baby anymore, so that's so crazy. But
Hmm.
um, yeah, it's interesting to see you having this transition of like, well, yeah, that motherhood side of myself, it's changing, where it does feel like all of a sudden you're not as much of a mother to your children as more of like this sort of motherly guide,
Hmm.
if that makes
Hmm.
any sense. And it's
Hmm. It
interesting,
does.
yeah, it's interesting to see the differences in that path of, oh, okay, all of a sudden now I'm having to reorient my brain into being a different kind of mother. I never really, I don't know, I never really thought about it in that. sense before.
Well, because you don't really think about it when you're trying to keep your children alive. We're like, oh, you will die if you tumble down those stairs, or at least, have some broken limbs, you know. And you probably, honestly, they are made to be able to fall. So it's probably like more or less fine. I've known some kids to fall down the stairs and they've been fine. But you are sustaining their lives at the
Yeah.
age that your daughter is. But um it there's a different kind of um I want to say kind of like pressure, and it's self-imposed, but where I'm like how I help them problem solve and how I react to a problem is formative for how they will when
Mm.
they grow up, as because I see it with me, and I call them, there's this, I call it like 90s moms. It's like, oh, that was like, yelling was a 90s mom thing. Like, in mind you, it could be like always, it's fine if you yell because that's just how it is, but it's like, we don't, the millennial moms were like, oh, we don't, you shouldn't yell at your kids. Like, you just shouldn't,
That is a millennial mom thing, isn't it?
it is. And it's like, oh, like, I just had a 90s mom. I was like, it's fine to do that, I guess. Because it's like, well, I'm mad, so I'm allowed. And it's like, well, like, that's one of the things my youngest, who's 8, I've been like, just because you're angry doesn't mean you're allowed to just act however you want. And I'm saying it to myself too, because that's kind of like how I grew up. It's not like there was nothing overtly abusive about any of the
Yeah.
the life I had, but it was very like, well, I had a very emotional mother who, if she was upset, she would yell and be like, why do you guys do this? And like, very blaming, we're very intentional about the way we speak. And again, this is, again, speaking of pressure, it might not just be self-imposed. There's a lot of videos. There's a lot of little shorts out there on like Instagram. Luckily I've opted out of TikTok. I'm like, I don't need to add that to my life. But they always filter down over onto the
Onto YouTube.
other,
Mm-hmm.
YouTube or Instagram. So
Yeah.
some of them are good. Like, some of them are thoughtful, and it is something that I don't want to be yelling at my kids. I want to be speaking to them. I want to react in a way that is the way I would love to see them react as they get older, and so there's that's sort of in your head of, oh shoot, I just kind of mildly freaked out,
Mm.
and I don't want that. Like, I don't want to see this behavior in them. Like, I started using this phrase, well, beggars can't be choosers. And it's fine. I'm fine with the phrase. It's like, well, beggars can't be choosers. Like, I don't know why. My mom used to say it, and it's like, well, it just, for those of you out there in YouTube internet land, it's like, well, if you don't have a lot of choices, this is the best you've got. You If you're a
Yeah.
beggar, you're not going to be choosy, whatever. My youngest said it, and completely out of context. He has no idea what it means. He just said it to his brothers. I don't remember even in what context it was, but it didn't make sense.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, he's fully using the words I use. And it's very, like, striking if it's
Mm.
something that you don't want to hear back. It's a mirror to your
Mm-hmm.
parenting. And it's like, oh, I did say that. Shoot. So,
No, it's very weird to watch a child grow up because in so many ways it feels like just a reliving of your own life, like through
from
the eyes of
another
them.
perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. Where you just sort of remember, oh yeah, my parents did that and that's how they
Mm-hmm.
handled it. Or, oh, I remember this. And she's a little bit too young for me to remember kind of all of
Right.
the things. But I
Yeah.
had some of this when I was nannying where you'd watch kids and you'd just be like, oh yeah, that was like
I
life
remember
is,
that.
yeah, life is hard as a kid. You have all of this potential, but you don't know how to do anything and you got to learn
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very interesting. But yeah, I like that sense of like children become this mirror to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that is like a really powerful thing to hold in your
Mm-hmm.
mind as you try to live out life the best you can and raise little beings to to
Go out
to
into the
handle
world.
life. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And
Uh-huh.
wanting, and I always try to, I don't want to say I always, I intend to bring the spiritual in more, and but
Mhm.
I don't as much as I'd like. But I don't
Uh-huh.
want it to be like a, oh well, Jesus is watching. I don't want it to be like a that, like the Santa Claus thing is like, oh, he's always watching. But I do want it to be like, is this how, like, how does Jesus want us? Does he want us to act unkindly to others? Like, how do we want to be treated? Because he's like he's forgiven us. So we must, like whatever the word I use for emulate, you know,
Yeah.
emulate this with it. But I don't want it to be like a, finger wagging. So it
Mhm.
is challenging in a way, because it's so easy to do that Sunday school answer, like, well, what would Jesus do? And
Mhm.
we had the bracelets and all that of the WWJD, and I don't want to just make it like a brand.
Yeah.
Like, this is a brand our family follows. It's like, no, I want it to be like an embodiment of care and love, for starting with your family.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's something that I do find. I try to share all of my shortcomings, like in stories. Like, you know what? When mommy was your age, I had trouble with that too. And here's how I gave it to the Lord. Or like, and now I'm okay. I've known daddy and he's grounded me alongside of Jesus. So, whatever. Like, I try to like bring in these sort of like experiential things.
Mhm.
Um, like, I don't do like, well, my mom used to just yell at me, so just be happy with that I'm even noticing. Like, I don't do that, even though it's tempting. But it's, yeah, it's something that like I I know that they're not mine. Like, it feels like they're
Mm.
yours, like they are yours, but they're
Right.
not. You don't own these little people.
No.
And you're trying to prep them to go out into the world. And it's something like, so understanding, seeing this process, the older they get, it it helps me to see like the how difficult it is, and the noble pursuit of motherhood, more than our culture affords it. Like,
Yeah.
I think it's such a shame, like, that our culture looks down on what mothers do.
Yeah.
Because it's, if you have a good mother, like, what I strive to be, to show my children how to be in the world, and how to, like, this is how we react to problems, and it's okay if we make mistakes. And like, that's like, I like, if you do that well, that is so huge in that person's life, who will then go on to touch other people's lives, and then, like, the ripple
Yeah.
effect. And so it's sort of, it gives a reverence to motherhood, like, then, that I didn't understand before.
Yeah. I was just having, it's funny you mentioned that because I was just having a conversation with Manuel for the channel and it hasn't come out yet,
Mhm.
but I was talking about how I thought motherhood was the most noble profession, like
Mhm.
noble position a woman could have. And that's not to say that every woman should be a mother,
Mhm.
but there is something like incredibly meaningful and powerful and beautiful about that path that, um, yeah, you like, there's nothing like it. And you don't really know it until you enter it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Even if you have high respect for mothers, like until you enter it, you don't recognize the what like the beauty, but the severity of what you're really getting yourself into.
Man,
Uh,
yeah, I remember a gal telling me, when my kids were quite young, her kids were like, it's almost the difference of my kids with for you. My kids were a little bit more in like toddler preschool, and her kids were the age of my kids.
mhm.
My kids are 12, 10, and 8. I remember her telling me her biggest worry was like screwing up her kids.
Mhm.
And I mean, she was a pastor's wife, but it was like, she didn't say screwing up. She said like messing up her kids. And
A
I
pastor wife would never.
I know she would never use the word screwing up. Anyway, so I remember being like, oh, no, I'm not worried about that. Like, I didn't say that. I just like, oh, okay. And I was like, I remember in my head, I was like, oh, I don't worry about that. And it's so crazy how I so do now.
Mm,
Because I don't think, and everyone has the different age where it strikes. So you could totally be like a toddler mom and get it, but I didn't get it. It didn't strike me until they were, I don't know, older. There's just something about, I guess, seeing them say the things that you are like, oh no, they repeated me and I don't like what I'm hearing.
mm,
It's just seeing that mirror. It's very hard to turn away from that. It's so clear. And that's that around, maybe when my oldest probably was around 10-ish, maybe 9 or 10, that's when I really, really was like, oh man, these phrases and things that are being repeated that aren't as like kind as I would like. And so that's, I'm like, oh, I'm very afraid of like, oh, sorry, mommy gave you that trauma. But
yeah,
we can only do the best we can. Like that's
yeah,
why where I'm like, Lord, please give grace to my future adult children's forgiveness towards me as a flawed human,
yeah,
as I will attempt to do for my own mother. So.
yeah. Well, here's something interesting. Maybe this, like, I've been thinking a lot about sort of this YouTube, TikTok, social media, mommy vlogger trend, and
Mm-hmm.
sort of trying to understand why is this happening and where is all of this pressure coming from. I wonder if this pressure of not wanting to screw up your kids is the motivating factor of all of
Mm.
this sort of.
And then you accidentally screw them up by being too soft on them. Yes, I have definitely thought of
Well,
the
I mean,
different.
it's not even just
Yeah.
like the sort of the interesting thing that I'm looking is that all of these sort of mothers
Mm-hmm.
are coming on to these social media platforms to be some sort of expert
Mm.
or support system for other mothers.
Mm.
And I can understand why that is happening because I think there
Mm.
is like a shortage of sort of that. Um,
The community aspect of mothers,
yeah,
like in person.
that's a better way to say it. I was in my head, I'm thinking some sort of like transfer of power from like motherhood, which
Oh
sounds
no, I
very
can okay, yeah, I
clinical.
can see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, there's this lack of this sense of like, oh, where is that community that's going to help you take on that sense? And then
Mm-hmm.
there's this other side of it that it becomes very lucrative to be an expert on mommy
Yeah.
things because there's
Yeah.
so many mothers who feel unequipped or have that fear of like I'm going to screw up my kid. So if
Mm-hmm.
someone else can give them the 1, 2, 3 step of how to not screw up their kid,
Mm-hmm.
great. And I just
Yeah.
wonder, well, I wonder how that sort of feedback sits with you of having these. Obviously, you're not on TikTok. I'm not on TikTok either, but you're right. They kind of flow into these
Mm-hmm.
other spaces and end up you're seeing them. So I'll say I saw TikTok, even though I never saw it on TikTok. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah,
these
exactly.
short
Yeah.
form, it's these short
Mm-hmm.
form videos. Um, like how is that for you as a mother to see that, and like how do you take on that sort of phenomenon of like the mommy expert of sorts?
So yes, that's a very good question, Kaz. I would say there are a lot of experts and there's a lot of, and I'm speaking super general. There's a lot of judgment of our past generations of motherhood and mothering.
Yes.
And like I've heard a number of videos. We're the first generation to actually apologize to our children. Maybe that might be true. It might be true, but this is definitely said in a because the previous generation kind of sucked. Like they kind of sucked
Mm-hmm.
at it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
and mind you, it's kind of both and like it's both true. Yes, it's true, but also we need to give grace for what we're doing that are gonna is going to probably like be rough on our kids in a different way.
All right.
So there's a bit of a and again, maybe I'm being a bit too judgmental of the mommy vloggers. Maybe I'm being judgmental of
Yeah.
them. But it's
Yeah.
it's a sort of judgmenty look at the past and then like a and now we can do it right.
It's
And as
this
of
mommy utopia of like,
yeah,
oh,
I'm afraid of that.
yeah.
I think there's satirical stuff coming out
Yes.
now with poking fun of it, which I
Yeah.
think is good and healthy of like, let's just have like a nice 10-minute long discussion and we'll go over like we'll do some perspective taking and then we'll, do this great conversation and then you'll see why you don't get to have a second ice cream bar. No, you
Yeah.
still, even after all that. Hmm. And like I've literally done the perspective taking thing with my older ones, like with my oldest. It's like, okay, like from my perspective, I'm saying that, and sometimes it does work, but other times it's like, okay, well, we're just gonna go on a walk. We need to get out today. Like, we don't want to go. We don't want to go. Don't want to go. I'm like, well, we're going. Sometimes you like it is, and it's legit, and it could have played out as a satire of me literally trying to employ all these like, here's reasons why it's like great to go out, you guys. Like, third walk in a row, third day in a row. And then I would say that, like, hey, well, here's these different, like, again, perspective taking things. Third, third day in a row though, mom. And I'm like, you didn't hear me? And then I just was like, okay, you are under the impression that you get a choice. You don't. And I'm like going back to my 90s mother
Your
roots
90s mom.
of like, oh, you don't get a choice. You're under the impression that you are entitled to reasons and to choices. The choice of getting to do, no, we're doing it. I was just trying to help you to understand why, but that was my bad. So, so, so like, but it's a mix of both. I actually think it's a mix of, because sometimes you do have to be like, oh no, we are doing this. And you can say it in a firm, and that's one of the things that I found for me is learning, oh, okay, firm, speaking like gentle but firm, the no nonsense, no down tones. Like, but like, and they're like, and sometimes when I'm being super like firm, my boys are like, why are you mad? And they literally go like they recoil. I'm like, boys, and I'm like, I'm glad I'm confident in this because I know what it is to just yell, to be yelled at, and to yell, to be honest. But I'm like, I'm not being mean or mad. I'm being firm. And that's okay.
Mhm.
So it just sort of, I don't know, like, wow, how did I get here from you're asking about the mommy vlogger thing? I think don't like, pride cometh before a fall, I suppose. Like, just
Mhm.
don't get too, I don't think like there's gonna be like they'll have the reckoning when they've had their kids, the child like labor board comes after them and their kids have been, you know, shown in their videos of like, okay, you've yeah, has them revenue streams. Do you have this in your kids' names? Because they're stars of all your videos. So
Mhm.
no, you haven't been like there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of things with like featuring your family. Some people don't have their kids in the videos and they just give the knowledge. Definitely prefer that. But then again, even just the knowledge and the sort of like standing up, like, look at how amazing we are with our new thoughts and ideas of how to do things. But like the gentle parenting thing and movement and stuff, and that's fine to an extent. It
Yeah.
can only
Well,
go so far.
it's funny you talked about the parodies because I saw some woman make a parody of the sort of, she's like, my TikTok after 6 months of being a mother. And it was like, 7 reasons why you should put your kid in a like a walk around harness. And then the next video is
7 reasons
seven
why not
reasons
to.
you should never ever do that. I'm a clinical whatever.
Yeah.
And then so it's all of these sort of like contradicting things and like people trying to out professional the other person of like, I'm a health and safety baby person. And all
Mm-hmm.
of these sort
Mm-hmm.
of contradicting information about what it is to be a good parent, what it is to like use whatever modern tools we have safely with your children and all these things. And yeah, I'm not very neurotic. So for me
Mm-hmm.
um it's not like a huge weight. But I just find it fascinating of like what is going on here and why is it Besides the sense that it can be immensely profitable to be an expert on something, why is this happening, and where is this sort of like infighting coming from? Um,
So I'd almost, I think that people, it's sort of modern internet. You know how the internet really brings out like the best in people.
well,
Not really.
sometimes it
Like
can.
it brings out, and I'm being sort of like facetious there, but
Yeah.
it can, but it also brings out the worst. It brings out both. It brings
Yes.
out, and so the sort of like, well, actually, that meme, well, actually, it comes in the mommy verse too.
Hmm.
And I think that, but I do think that this is a new thing. This, we can give all of our opinions, and motherhood, being a mother, like, this is the, for whatever the first generation was. I don't know if it'll be millennials. I think it will be millennials. Not, I don't, I think the Gen X are getting, aging out of the having younger children. I think they're probably like getting, they're more grandparents now, or like adult children now. So I think millennials will probably be like the first parents on, like, with the social media the way it is. And there, I mean, my husband and I have been watching through Malcolm in the Middle. Oh my goodness. I know that this wasn't the norm. I know it wasn't the norm, but like, oh my goodness. Because I have three boys. So I was like, oh well, like this is a boy family. And I remember watching it, it was so funny. And I mean, I love the characters, but oh man, oh, they like, she yells so much. She yells so much. And that was supposed to be the funny thing, but it kind of like reflected that's why I say, like, oh,
The
crappy
90s mom.
90s moms. Like, and stuff like that. And like the boys are so mean to each other. And look, like, I do think that, like, everyone, all, like, there was a time where, it was fine to hit your kids, and it definitely wasn't for our parents. Like, my mom never hit me. Like, parents, there's, I know that it kind of is adjusting of, oh, you're not allowed to do that to your kids anymore. You're not allowed to do that to your kids anymore. Like, it sort of goes in iterations as, like, every generation goes through, or whatever, what's okay to, how you should raise your children, how you should interact with them. But this is the first very, very public way of parents looking back on what they didn't like about what their parents did and what they think we should do now. It's the first
Yeah.
time we're seeing everyone vocally, like, again, this is the first time parents will ever, like, regularly um apologize to their children. It's sort of a
Yeah.
commentary.
I think you're right on. I just think it's a bit of a mistake because if you're
How
so
so?
because if you're so confident that what you had was so awful and you can do it better, you're just
Hmm.
opening the door for your kid to do the same thing to you 50 years from now,
Oh, 100%.
or
a hundred
whatever,
percent.
or grandkids, whatever. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you're having a kid at 50 years from now. But anyways, but like, there's just this sense of like, were my I don't think I had a crappy mom. She yelled at me
Mm.
sometimes.
Hmm. Oh, and I
Um,
don't think that, I wouldn't
no,
call my mom crappy. Sorry,
no,
I was quoting, but yeah, I understand.
I don't think you would say that either. I know you wouldn't say that. But there's
Yeah.
that sense of like, I don't want to yell at my kid, but is yelling at your kid point blank a bad thing? Well, if they're about to run in front of a car, you
Right.
bet I'm going to yell at my
You
kid.
will. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
Anything to
Hmm.
stop them, right? And so this level at which where instead of just pulling out the roots and saying we can totally redesign it better, you
Hmm.
have to you have to rely on the wisdom of the generation that came before you. Because
Mm.
that's what I look at my mom. My parents were not perfect. They never claimed to be.
Hmm.
Um, you know, but if you look at the way they were raised versus the way we were raised, it is
Hmm.
an unimaginably better world than what they had. And
Hmm.
so my goal is not to be better than my mom. It's to take all the things that she did that I did think were good
Hmm.
and
Build on it.
hopefully build on that
Hmm.
to make her world unimaginably better than um, what even I had, and what
Hmm.
what my parents had and their parents before them. It's this idea of like, how do we keep moving together,
Hmm.
learning from the wisdom of the people that came before us to, yeah, make a world where kids are safer and find a way to flourish. But I think there's so much of this sort of, I want to be a gentle parent, I don't want to be emotional, that
Mm.
loses sight of the realities of what some of those things that came from our family shaped us and did for us to be able to launch and to be able to learn what it is to forgive and to deal with the vast array of emotions that come with humanity. Does
Hmm.
that make any sense?
But I think it's indicative of what is happening across the internet when it comes to people sharing thoughts about the previous way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like, look how bad that was, and look how good we have it now. And it really bugs me because of my interest in historical fashion and how people um saying, oh, like, people used to think that the world was flat, and people used to think that people used to not bathe, and people used to like, and like, so such like folk myth, like that's all myths.
Yeah.
People knew that the world was round for a very long time, actually, and people, they didn't bathe in the way you do, but they kept clean. In like, they didn't have copious amounts of water that they could take showers,
Yeah.
but they had a cleaning regimen, and it's just different.
Right.
um
It's similar in the way where when people talk about religion, they think that ancient people are just stupid. It's
yeah,
like,
yes, I hate that.
okay,
Like, people are just such dummies, didn't know anything.
but it's the
Yeah.
same. It's the same with like child rearing and community building. If we just
Hmm.
assume that ancient people are stupid, medieval, unworthy to listen to, and we have to tear everything down to rebuild it, you first of all you can't, because
Hmm.
anything you're building on now comes from that boundless history of what came before
Hmm.
you, even if you don't know it. But
Hmm.
again, if you're just tearing everything down and restarting and doing it totally different, you're losing sight of what might be good that you don't necessarily understand, a good that you might not be able to participate in. That doesn't mean
Hmm.
following all the negative patterns that your
Yeah.
parents had, because there definitely are negative patterns that have we've all experienced in varying
Hmm.
degrees. But I don't know, that sense of like, I want to be the expert to tell you how to raise your kids without ever knowing you.
Hmm.
It seems it seems a little um like it seems a little dangerous to me in a certain sense.
Well, but that's because it is. You are correct. It is. Well, it's this sort of like, enter at your own peril, making blanket statements, as opposed to, I might be right, but I might be wrong too. And a lot of people don't like doing that on the internet because it's not as pithy of a, it's not
It
as
does
catchy.
yeah, it doesn't have that clickbait title of 10 things you need to
No.
know before you become a mother.
Yeah.
But
I
I
love that. Actually, I didn't even know we would end up talking about the motherhood thing, because this is the practical. Like, this is the side of the, because that's one of the things you said that you're looking to explore, is like, how do you live out the meaning, and in the practical way. And I suppose, like, I really don't talk much about motherhood. I talk about femininity almost more, but that's part of my femininity.
right,
And the nurturing side of femininity has so much to do with motherhood, but it is truthfully the most practical, like, side of my day to day.
right,
Living out my meaning is by, like, practicing what I preach to my children,
yeah,
and that part of being forgiving when I mess up, forgiving of myself, like asking for, I do, like, I did like that video. I do like that I apologized to my children. And I did before I saw the video, mind you, but I like, oh yeah, that's nice. That is nice that we do that. But but also not just apologizing to my children, because kids are so quick to forgive. It's me apologizing to my, like, to, sorry, accept, not apologizing, but accepting the forgiveness, and forgiving myself for, like, when I slip, of when I fall short of how I think I should be. Um, and yeah, that's
well, it
that's
was
it.
really interesting because you were talking about like, how do you instill in your children this sense of like thinking about Jesus, or like the religious, if for
Mhm.
anyone who maybe doesn't have the confidence in Jesus as we do, but like how do you
Mhm.
instill that spirituality in them without being so explicit in words and making it become like a marketing scheme, or
Mhm.
a, like
Mhm.
a how would you say it, like a just like a placating sentiment, or something.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I
Platitudes and
yeah,
whatnot. Yeah.
platitude, yeah. And yeah, there's that sense of, oh well, to really install it into them, you have to do it yourself.
Mm.
And that's the most
Mhm.
terrifying thing ever, right? Because it's like, okay, I have to really wrestle with my own sense of belief, not only in the head here, but like the way that it comes out in my actions and what it
Mhm.
is, and not just do it for show because I want them to do it, but like really have this earnestness and sincerity with it. And
Mm.
it's a it's a I think that all is like a feature, not a bug,
Mm.
because I look at parenthood. I never expected my parents to be perfect,
Mhm.
but I was grateful that they tried to do good as best as they could.
Mhm. Mhm.
And you know, even when they failed, like having that space to kind of realize it was at the aim to do as
Mhm.
best as they could. Um, and yeah, the a lot of the things that I believe, or that those seeds that planted for me to continue a faith
Mhm.
tradition outside of, you know, their tutelage, if you will. You get to at
Mhm.
a certain age, 20, 21, I mean even at 18, and you kind of have to make the decision, is this I'm doing this because I always did it, or like am I going to take it seriously? Like the
Mhm.
seeds that were planted there had very little to do with what they said to me, but far more often what they actually did and how they lived out their life. And that even included places where they failed, seeing
Mhm.
places where maybe they didn't live up to the ideal that they spoke by their words, and watching
Mhm.
how that manifested in different ways in life. Like that,
Oh, and it's so easy to, it's like, oh, I just failed. Like it's so easy to get bogged down because you
yeah.
notice so much more when you fail when you have the kids watching.
Yeah. Well, it's hard for me because um, I became Orthodox
Mm.
only a couple years ago. And so I'm basically continuing a faith, but in a different sort of religious structure, like
Mhm.
organization of sorts.
Mhm.
And so this idea of like, oh, I want to act as well as I can for my daughter without really fully understanding what it is to act well as an
Mm.
Orthodox Christian, and
Mhm.
what that means, and having to have grace for myself. And I think that what is going to end up doing is being really helpful for her, because she can open the door to understand like, oh, we're learning together.
Mm.
But yeah, I don't know. I could really screw her up. I don't think. I mean, I think it's very hard to really screw up a kid. So most people who try well enough, I think they're pretty good. But you know,
Mhm.
you don't. You want to have that humility in yourself to be able to hold that authority of like, this is what we're doing, because it's the best that I know how, and the best that I
Mhm.
see at this time in this moment, while also opening the door to say, I could be wrong, let's work through this together. And that obviously
Mhm.
comes in different frames as they grow up and as they age. But
Mm.
um, I mean, and I mean, you learn things from all the practical things. Like, I don't want to go on a walk. We've gone on a walk 3 days in a row, and then you have to have that sort of like, you know,
Okay,
clash of
I'm just
what
gonna
that looks
say it.
like.
Yeah, we're doing it. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you learn like that thing, that sort of thing scales in all these ways. But yeah, the big questions are sort of, well, how do you how do you fight fair and well in the battles
Mm.
on the most important things, like the
Mm.
spiritual things, the real like meaning making actions in life and questions in life. How do you do that well? Feels like a like a practice match to get to that place, to build trust with your children, to um yeah, have that relationship. And I really love what you said about that. Where like kids, you don't really own your kids. They're yours,
Mm,
but they're yours to manage as
mm-hmm.
as opposed to being a dictator of,
Mm,
and
mm,
like
right. Because like,
a
they're not your
slave of.
slaves.
No,
Mm-hmm.
no.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes it feels like that when they're like, "Oh, go do chores," but
Like, well, you
by
know what's
minions.
teaching? Yeah, actually, I pay my kids for it. That's another thing of like, how do we give them money? Well, some people do allowance, some people pay for chores. It's $1 a chore, so I think I'm getting the better
Yeah.
end of the deal. But they like, they slowly but surely save up their money. But yeah, it is hard to know, like even talking about spiritual battles, like after COVID, the boys like really were like, we don't want to go to church. Like they were really, because they got used to not going
Mhm.
for like years, 2 years.
Yeah.
And I mean, I would, again, this is sort of that whole mix of um, the two ways of managing, is like giving reasons and then just saying we're just doing it. The I told you so way of doing it,
Mhm.
like because I said so. No, sorry, I told you so. Because we're doing this because I said so, or this is happening because because we just are. I want to give them a chance at getting an explanation, but even if it doesn't work, sorry, you don't have a choice. Sorry, it's just that's how it is. But I still tried to treat you like a human being and give you a reason because you're old enough to have a reason to understand reasons. Like so I would because I would be like, okay, participation with the community of God is really important. And going through all my like Jonathan Peugeot's, like sort of catalog of in the symbolism and the participation
Jonathan
and
Peugeot needs to start a mommy course of all the reasons to get your kids on walks.
I know on
It'll
walks
sell
in
like,
church.
yeah, crazy.
Yeah, yeah, no, well, but why to go to church? All because it's good, because it's good to go to church. Why? Like it's the why. So that's how I distilled it down to like because we want to participate. You can't participate in the community of God at home, and then I'm all like, yeah, look at me with my what a good reason, and then no, I still don't want to though, mommy. Well, too bad. Like we are going. Like it's just it is. I gave you the reason. It's not good enough for you. We're still going. So it's sort of the weird. This like it doesn't mean stop giving them the reasons. Like I think it's good to give like because maybe there are some times where I do give reasons and they're like, okay, I can see that. But a lot of the time they're like, you still don't want to, and it's just finding that the balance.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'm sort of an oddball here, in a lot of ways where I actually don't think, um, as humans we operate rationally. Like we have the
No,
capacity
you're
to
right. No,
reason.
you are right. It's the I gave really good reasons and that somehow they didn't take it. It's like, well, kids are
because
like, we
because
don't
we're
work that way.
irrational as much as we have the capacity to reason. Like there's so much of us that are driven by irrational things, and
I just
so
don't want to.
yeah, it's like, yeah, learning how to, that's where sometimes the sort of, yeah, explaining to kids the reasons, it's like they don't they don't think that way, they understand an action.
Well, and that's why you do age appropriate
Yeah.
reasons.
Yeah.
Like this, I don't think I started explaining reasons until like maybe 2 years ago. So,
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, at 15, the because I said so becomes more cutting than when you're 4,
yeah. Yeah,
and like we know that.
exactly.
Like we've lived
Yeah.
through that.
Yeah, yeah, I
But
remember. Yeah, I still very
yeah,
much remember that. Yeah.
no.
Anyway, any more
Well,
readings? Or
do you want
do we
another
get through?
reading, or we could land the plane? Up to
Oh,
you.
we could. Oh, there is one thing that was just a little bit thinking about. You're like, oh, we don't know. She's got it. Okay. No, I have. I just thinking about the garden and gardening,
Mm.
and I remember you were talking about seasons with Verdi last episode.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the episode that you sent me. I don't know where I'll come in the order of
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
but
it would be the last one.
okay. So The seasons thing, that's been something that I've been meditating on and thinking about. And by seasons, I mean like, yes, there's literal seasons of the weather, but everything everything has a season. And I
Yeah.
know that I'm just quoting King Solomon here.
Yeah.
But it's understanding that a lot of sin is sin because it's out of season.
Right. It's not,
And
it's
by
not,
sin I mean missing the mark. I don't
yeah.
mean like evil bad things. It's like, well, I guess I do, but I what I mean is, oh, but this is okay at this time. Yes, because it's within the proper boundary of the thing, of the time or the space that it
Right.
was appropriate for that. And that's been, and it's all very ethereal, this sort of talk about. I have trouble. I haven't talked this one out. I've talked out some of the earlier things we were talking about before, so I don't
Yeah.
have
Go
the
for it.
words.
That's okay.
Oh, I don't
It's
know.
hard.
No, well, it just, okay, like when that understanding that when Adam and Eve ate of the fruit, they ate of it too soon. And as a
Mhm.
Protestant, I'd never heard that explanation. It just seemed like the eternal evil bad cookie jar. Never take a cookie, ever, ever. And you did the thing. And it's like God didn't want them to because he just didn't. And it was a forever test. And
Mhm.
it just seemed so unfair. I just didn't like that. I was like, why would you just be like, hey, there's the thing. There's the cookie jar. It's just always gonna tempt you
Right in the
forever.
middle of the garden.
Right in the middle. Yeah, no, and it just never sat well with me. And no one had any explanations. It just was, that's just how it was. It just is. But what if they, well, no, there's not what ifs because it happened. So it's, there's no what ifs. But I heard the Lord of Spirits guys talking about, no, 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 it wasn't, they talked about it, but it was Jonathan Pajot talking about it, how um John of Damascus spoke about this amongst other church fathers as well, like about how the key, you don't give the keys to your car to a 5-year-old, but you would to a 14-year-old who has their learners. Like Adam and Eve were young, they weren't ready, and they took it at the wrong time. They took it at the wrong time. It could have been right, but like the same exact thing, the same exact tree, the same exact fruit. It could have been right, but it wasn't because it wasn't the right time. And there's so, like, and that is almost everything. Mind you, of course, like murder, like some of the Ten Commandments, those are kind of hard. I understand why those are the Ten Commandments. Those are hard and fast. But most things, it does come down to like, is it the right time?
Yeah. Tim Mackey
And that's something I've
talk
been thinking about lately.
yeah,
So
Tim Mackey
anyway.
talks a lot about it, of like taking it on their own terms.
Mm,
So in some ways, like defining it for themselves.
mm-hmm,
Um, but yeah, there's that sense of like, yeah, it's not that that was bad in and of itself, but that it wasn't, um, yeah, it wasn't properly oriented at that time because
mm-hmm.
they weren't developed enough to handle that, and that's why, in some ways, death is
A
our
mercy in a
yeah,
way.
our punishment, but it becomes a mercy because
Mm-hmm,
to live in that fallen world where we're all just defining things on our own terms for eternity, um, yeah, that would be miserable.
mm-hmm,
But yeah, that certain amount of time, whatever God graces us with, to learn what it is to be more truly human and to really viscerally understand the good and the evil.
mm,
Um, yeah, there's something sort of beautiful to that in the frame of eternity.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it makes me look at seasons of my life differently and understanding where I'm at, where my kids are at, looking at it makes me look at sin differently. It makes
Mm-hmm.
me look at like right and wrong in the sense of I do, again, I'm not trying to be waffling on some things are like okay, lying that you have Jews hidden in the house. yes, it's the wrong thing to be honest in that moment. Like there are always extenuating circumstances, like you said. I'll yell at my kid if she's running into the street. Like there's always, but what if, like I'm sure many people could come up with the extreme circumstances, but
Yeah.
in general, sort of looking at this flow of time and the certain things being appropriate and not appropriate, and sort of learning when to let go of the like not appropriate things for the age of my kids and the appropriate things for their age, and like, and then for me as I go through life and in the, where am I at in my, and this kind of goes back to like the where am I at in my life in the flow of time. And so yeah, it's a lot of interesting, a little just contemplative things. I need time to think about it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you thinking through it here with me.
Well,
Any
thank you for giving me the room.
Oh, of
Like, oh, but
course.
one more thing.
Yes.
No, that was it. That was the
Oh,
one more
that's it.
thing.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
thanks,
Oh no, I was
Andrea.
joking. Yeah.
Oh,
The season's talk was the last thing, and thank you for giving me that.
yeah, no worries. Do you have any last words before we close it off? Or any last
Well, thank you
questions?
for if you made it here. Thank you
Yeah.
for whoever was listening.
Yeah, like, subscribe.
Yeah, I guess like and subscribe here if you haven't, and I
Go to
will be trying
Andrea.
to get more content
Shameless
out.
plug.
What?
Is it shameless plug? Go
I
for it.
know, I know it's time. Well, we had to wait till the end for the
Yes.
shameless plug, and
Yes,
then,
of
but
course.
I haven't been putting much new content, but I'm going to try to with these new quandaries I've brought up.
Well, I'm
So
looking
we'll see.
forward. Yeah, I'm looking forward to see what you do. So,
Yeah, well, thanks.
of course.
Looking
Thank
forward to
you.
seeing how this goes, this new format, as it
Yeah, we'll see
continues
how
on.
it goes.
Yeah.
Walking through the forgotten garden. It seems like rain